Hello, everyone. Hope you've had a great week thus far. I'm thrilled to welcome you to another insightful, expository, and informative episode of our new program series for this first quarter of 2025 titled Infrastructure Dimensions and Economic Development on Amogate Radio Communications. I remain your host, Titilola Ogunshona. Last episode, we discussed the role of financial infrastructure in an economy. We considered critical elements of financial infrastructure. We also established that financial infrastructure is an important part of the financial system of a nation. In other words, the quality and efficiency of financial infrastructure would have far-reaching implications. We observed that it would determine the efficiency of intermediation in an economy, also the ability of lenders to evaluate the risk, and also the ability of borrowers to obtain credit, loans, insurance, and other financial products at competitive rate, terms, or conditions. And the reality that we've established is that the process of strengthening the financial infrastructure of a nation isn't automatic. It will take time, resources, and particularly political will on the part of government to achieve. We established that one of the critical elements of financial infrastructure in a nation is easy accessibility to capital or finance by businesses, firms, corporations in a country. We examined the top 10 countries that offered easiest access to capital. For those who missed last week's episode, for you to get more insight to what we discussed, you can check us out on our YouTube page. So on today's episode, we would be discussing the criticality of small and medium enterprises, popularly called SMEs, to economic development. Small and medium enterprises, popularly known as SMEs, play a major role in most economies, particularly in developing countries or nations. Research has shown that SMEs contribute significantly to job creation and economic development among the globe. And we have empirical evidences to back this up, okay? Research has shown that about 90% of businesses across the globe are SMEs. In fact, over 95% of European businesses are SMEs. In addition, 50% of employment comes from the SMEs. So you can see the potentials, the contribution of SMEs to economic development in any nation. In fact, in emerging economies, the former SMEs contribute about 40% to the gross GDP. The gross domestic product, that's the national income. And this is even excluding the figures of the informal sector. In emerging economies, we have the informal sector, even have taking up a significant part. Okay, so it's even the global workforce is growing, and it's estimated that by the year 2030 is going to need about 600 million jobs. Thus, small and medium enterprises development, that's SME development, becomes a priority for governments across the globe, particularly developing economies. And the level of financial infrastructure, which includes accessibility to finance or capital, will be a major determinant for achieving the growth and development of SMEs that have been established to play a pivotal role in achieving economic growth and development in any nation. Let's consider the definition of SME. These are businesses with limited number of employees with relatively lower turnover. But you should know that for various countries, the definition of SME would vary. Generally, businesses with fewer than 250 employees and with an annual turnover of less than $50 million are considered to be SMEs. We also have the micro enterprises, and that's the smallest type of SME, and that is for firms with less than 10 employees and an annual turnover of less than $2 million. We also have another type we call the small enterprises, okay, and that's those between 10 to 50 employees with an annual turnover of less than $10 million. Like I said earlier, different countries will have that definition, of what they will consider an SME. So let's look at Nigeria, the CBN classification of SME. So in Nigeria, businesses, firms with asset base between 5 million naira and 500 million naira, excluding land and building, is considered to be an SME, and also with total numbers of employees between 11 and 200 will be considered to be an SME. And firms who fall within the scope of micro enterprises are those firms with less than 10 employees with a total asset of less than 5 million naira. So the question we're going to answer is, how important is the development of SMEs to economic development of a nation? What role does SME play in economic development? We're talking about infrastructure dimensions, we're talking about financial dimension, not looking at a critical sector. We are looking at the development of SMEs in a particular country or nation. So what role do they play in economic development? We need to state that financing and empowerment of SMEs is pivotal in achieving sustainable economic growth and development. This is because financing SMEs would help encourage innovation, competition, and help nations sustain high level of competitiveness in global markets and value chains. Thus, for nations seeking a digital and sustainable future, concerted effort must be made by government to develop policies, ensure adequate financial infrastructure that will strengthen SMEs in such a nation. According to OAT 2006, SME is a major contributor to technical innovation and new product development. Let's go ahead to consider specific roles played by SMEs in an economy that would help foster growth and development. Now, the first is that the SMEs serve as the engine of economic growth, of a nation. One of the ways of measuring economic growth of a country is to look at the value of the gross domestic product, and that is the monetary value of all goods and services produced in the nation, at a particular point in time, especially in a given period of a year. So when SMEs grow, that is when you have more firms coming on board, when you have more firms producing more, when you have firms providing more services in the economy, it's expected that more revenue will be generated. It's expected that there will be business expansion. It's expected that it will lead to more job opportunities, for the citizens of that country. And this will also speak to the standard of living of the average citizen in such a country. SMEs are key contributors to employment and value creation in a nation. And we have empirical statistics that has backed it up, that has revealed this. According to WTO 2020, SMEs provide 70% of jobs and contribute nearly 35% of GDP in developing countries or nations. Even looking at African continent, in South Africa, over 76% of jobs in South Africa were created by the SME. Let's come back down to Nigeria. SME has contributed about 48% of the gross domestic product in Nigeria. That is 48% of total revenue income earned by Nigeria, came from the SMEs. And even looking at the statistics of the workforce, about 80% of the workforce in Nigeria, of the Nigerian population, are actually working in one SME organization or the other. So from these statistics, you see that any government should be serious, must have the political will to not just enact financial policies, business policies, regulatory policies that would support the growth of the SME in their countries, but also have the political will to implement, be deliberate about implementing to see positive outcomes. Because If you want to talk about standard of living, achieving economic development, which is going to speak to the quality of life, the ability of your people to earn income, definitely the sector that would provide these job opportunities must have the business environment, must have the enabling environment to thrive. And of course, another role of SME is the SMEs have been pivotal in reducing the level of poverty in an economy. And they'll be able to achieve this through employment, training, and other social benefits. So, of course, if you provide the enabling environment for businesses to thrive, they'll be able to expand, like I said earlier, thus providing more job opportunities for the people. And when people are gainfully employed, that speaks to the ability to be self-sufficient and even being able to save. And when they can save, they can also invest further. So it's important because you can't talk about economic development when the rate of poverty in the country is high. And that will be high if the rate of unemployment in the country is very high. I read an article yesterday, and the rate of inflationary pressure in Nigeria, the implication of that rate is that about 13 million Nigerians are at risk of falling below poverty lines. Thus, one of the measures that the Nigerian government can take to reduce this is strengthening the level of financial infrastructure among other infrastructure dimensions, that the SMEs will be exposed to in order to develop the SMEs. Another role played by the SMEs is that they are responsive to changes in the economy. SMEs are majorly customer-oriented, whether I like it or not, because they understand the needs of their community. They understand the peculiarities of the people living in their communities, and they can respond to it. And thus, they have what it takes to respond to the needs of their local communities. In addition to all of these roles that I have spoken about, they provide supply chain support. In some cases, they act as vital suppliers to larger businesses by providing raw materials. They provide components and distribution services to larger businesses. It's obvious from what we've said that the SME plays a vital role in achievement of economic growth and development in any nation. But one of the factors that has been limiting the growth of the SMEs in achieving, its full potentials in a nation, in an economy, especially in developing nations and economies, is limited access to finance. There are a lot of other factors, in terms of infrastructural deficiencies, inefficiencies, but one of the major factors that research has shown is limited access to finance. So this implies that SME financing is very crucial, is important, and there must be deliberate, concerted effort by government of various nations, especially developing economies, to ensure adequate access to financing by SMEs. In fact, according to International Finance Corporation, IFC, about 65 million firms, that is 40% of the formal MSMEs, I mentioned when we talk, the micro, small, and medium enterprises in developing countries, have financing gap of about $5.2 trillion every year. And this is estimated to be about 1.4 times the present level of global MSME lending. MSME, that is the micro, small, and medium enterprises. Further research has also shown that in Nigeria, about 80% of SME are stifled because of poor financing and associated problems. And greater challenge actually lies within accessibility to funds or capital. Also, Fatoki and Gower 2010, what they did was to carry out a survey to look at the internal and external factors that SMEs are faced with, the major problems they've been experiencing, faced by SMEs. And what they did was they looked at 30 factors, 30 items, and they ranked, in order of priority. And I'll just look at the top 10, top 10 factors that affected the growth of SMEs when they carried out that survey. So at number 10, the 10th factor, in terms of looking at both internal and external factors affecting the growth of SMEs, the 10th factor then was high competition for this particular research. At number 9 was location of the business, that the location of the business would affect the growth of the SME. At number 8, it was inadequate market research. So when the market research is not properly conducted, it's going to affect decisions that will make, and that could pose a problem for development of SMEs. In fact, even the growth potentials could be hampered. That was at number 8. At number 7, which was inadequate demand. At number 6, high interest rate. So high interest is another factor, and this is another factor we want to consider in subsequent episode. We are at number 5. We have insufficient government support. At number 4, crime. Number 3, insufficient owners' equity contribution. And I found the last two. That number 2, lack of collateral. And that is finance related. And number 1, out of the 30 items that were ranked, at number 1 was lack of access to finance. So this speaks to the role that financing plays in development of SME, and that would also speak to the growth and development potentials of a nation. Various schools of thought have advocated that financing is the lifeblood of economic activities, and SMEs are considered to be the engine of the global economy because they constitute about 90% of companies, they hire about 50% of workforce, and estimated to provide about 600 million jobs by year 2030. In fact, in some other climates, researchers proven that SMEs represent about 98% of businesses, they employ about 70% of official workforce, and they yield about 50% of GDP. So it means that SMEs can only survive, develop, and thrive in the market only when granted adequate financial support and adequate accessibility to capital. And this position is supported by a World Bank report which noted that funding is the Achilles heel of growth of SMEs. And this is the second top-rated factor hindering their growth in economic activities, particularly in developing and emerging economies. Now, there was a research carried out by Issa Faye and Dan Goblon in 2022, and they tried to come up with a framework to understand the nexus between SME financing and job creation. In their project, Small Business Growth are investing in SMEs create jobs, and I find the submissions, the findings from that report, from that research work very interesting, and that's what I want to share with us today. Some of the notable findings from that research work include: 1, that for every additional $1 million in financing to SMEs in developing countries is associated with creating an average of over 16 additional jobs over 2 years in comparison to SMEs with no financing. So this multiplier effect is an average across emerging economies and focuses on jobs created directly by SMEs receiving financing. This is huge. So it means for every $1 million that you give out as loans, as credit lines to SMEs, especially in developing countries, it has the potentials of providing 16 jobs, an average of 16 jobs over 2 years. That's massive. That kind of impact is going to have for, like we said, developing economies. But similar studies conducted in the UK and US suggested a smaller multiplier. So for every $1 million, you can only get about 3 to 4 jobs, per $1 million. That's the differential. So it means that SMEs financing, even from this empirical evidence, this research shows that SME financing is crucial to job creation. And job creation will speak again to income levels of the people, and that would also speak to the standard of living of citizens. Also, smaller firms create more jobs from financing than larger firms. Relatively, employment change experienced by SMEs employing 10 to 49 employees is almost 3 times as much as those that employ more than 100 employees. That is a whole lot. Why I'm bringing all these empirical evidences is to show the extent, the importance of SME financing in a nation. And you look at the impact that, so it means for SMEs, financing is really crucial for development of particularly developing economies. If you are joining us, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of our program. We have been discussing the criticality of SME financing to economic development. We have established that for various countries, they would have their definition of SMEs, but generally they're businesses with limited number of employees with relatively lower turnover. And in Nigeria, we said that for an SME, the asset base has to be between 5 million and 500 million, excluding land and building, and the number of employees would be between 11 and 200. You've also seen that SMEs play a pivotal role in achievement of economic growth and development in the nation, and we're going to look at the various roles that they have been playing in various nations and the role that they should play even in developing economies. And we looked at one of the major drawbacks, challenges faced by SMEs, and that is limited access to financing. And of course, we went across the globe to back it up with empirical evidences, report, research conducted by researchers across the globe. But research has shown that about 99% of European businesses are SMEs, and they provide for over 85 million jobs to European citizens. And SMEs in Europe has been proven to be the brain, the driving force of its innovation and high level of competitiveness. I want us to consider something before we go, and it's to look at the business climate generally. That which country or which of these countries would you consider best in class for SMEs? Not just financing alone, but which country is best in class for small, medium enterprises? So looking at the business climate. And that was a 2019 SME Business Climate Index report that I saw, which I want to share. And what it did was to assess the business environment for SMEs in 13 selected economies. And the assessment was actually based on 6 components. They looked at the red tape, the tax policy, labor market flexibility, financing, export opportunities, and competition. One thing that keeps standing so clear is that for most reports on SME development surveys that have been done, there is no way one of the components will not speak to financing, and this particular survey, the report, is not an exception to it. And what they looked at were 13 economies around red tape, tax policy, like I mentioned. So in terms of financing, the component they looked at in terms of finance, one of the 6 components, is that they looked at getting credit. How easy was it to get credit, by SMEs, availability of finance. They looked at loan rejection over the past 12 months. They also looked at another component, other financing element, was bank interest rates for loans to SMEs, which is very important. Look at all of those criteria that was considered. Also the red tape, they looked at regulatory quality, the business freedom, government policy relating to businesses. That's the second component. Another component, the tax policy. What this report looked at was the spread between base corporate tax rate and SME corporate tax rate. Also looking at the level of SME corporate tax rate. And in terms the fourth component, labor market flexibility. They looked at the hiring and firing processes, the practices. They also consider one major one that's also important is the Human Development Index. In these economies. They also looked at the fifth component, which is the export opportunities, looking at trading across borders, share of exporting SMEs in total SMEs. Also, the last but not least is competition, and they looked at this critical factor, which is intensity of local competition. So it's talking about the 2019 SME Business Climate Index. And I find it very interesting. Look at the top five. Okay. At number 5, we have Singapore. Okay. At number 5. At number 4, we had Netherlands. At number 3, we have the United States. At number 2, we had Hong Kong. At number 1, we had Canada. So, and the peculiarity of those reports shows that the top 3, that's the topic that in terms of Canada, Hong Kong, and the US, enjoy favorable tax policy and relatively good financing conditions. Okay, and also flexible labor markets in terms of hiring and firing procedures. Okay, and that is the top 5, okay, from the findings of the report. But number 6, we have Belgium. Number 7, we have UK. The 8th position out of 13 countries that were considered was Germany. Number 9, we have Poland. 10, Ireland. 11, France. At number 12, we have Slovakia. And 13, we have Czechia. Okay, I also find some things interesting that came out strong, that the major bottlenecks that was experienced in the UK and Germany is the tax policy. And if we recall, the component of that, the tax policy include the spread between the base corporate tax rate and SME, corporate tax rate, and also the level of SME corporate tax rate in that country. So it was strong. Those are the components they looked at. And for France, which occupied the 11th position out of 13 economies that were chosen for the review, one thing that stood out strong for France was inflexibility of the labor market. The labor market inflexibility. And the components that were chosen, the criteria for measuring labor market flexibility included hiring and firing practices, and also Human Development Index. And the ADI is one of the measures for economic development of a nation, the HDI, which also can be broken into 3 composites. 3 components. Okay, that is inflexibility of the labor market. Another one was red tape. The red tape, and the red tape speaks to regulatory quality, business freedom, and government policies relating to businesses. Okay, that is what the red tape speaks to. And also another thing about France that I saw in the report is the lack of financial or inadequate financial information. So those were the things that came out strong in this particular report. So from all of these reports, empirical evidences that we have brought on today's episode, we can see the crucial role that SME financing plays in achieving, enhancing economic growth and development in any nation. I can see that when it comes to SME financing, accessibility to adequate finance, it plays a major role in developing economies more than the developed economies. So it's important, like I said, that government will continue to work around financial infrastructure, work around development of financial market, work around developing, implementing policies that would enhance the right business climate for SMEs to thrive, that will provide accessibility to capital finance for SMEs to expand their business operations, because they are very relevant, very crucial to creating jobs, opportunity in an economy. Subsequent episode, maybe next episode, we'll look at some African countries with thriving SME sectors, not just developed countries. Yes, we know the peculiarity faced by SMEs in developing economies, economic countries, but we still have some African countries that's thriving in terms of their SME sector. So we see what are the lessons? What lessons can we learn from them? What have they done differently? What initiatives have their government put in place that helped them? And we'll take it from there, on next episode next week. Well, this is all that we can take on today's episode. I hope that you have found this episode informative, expository, insightful. I've enjoyed my time on the program today, but I will not leave without dropping a quote. And the quote I'm going to drop is from Karen Mills, which says that it isn't the government that creates jobs, it's small businesses. And that is the reality. And for those of us aspiring to be entrepreneurs, those of us starting the journey of entrepreneurship, remember, do not give up, because a big business starts small. So that business idea, that business venture you have started will grow big. That is the first step. And with the mindset that government will not create the jobs, rather they create the enabling environment, the infrastructure for jobs to thrive, for businesses to thrive. That's why we're talking about the efficiency of the financial infrastructure, which will translate to, improve financial services, and definitely that will bring about more easier accessibility to finance and capital, for SMEs. Okay, remember to join us next week, on other programs, Monday through Fridays, 5 p.m. WAT. This program definitely would air by God's grace next Friday WAT, but all the interesting, informative, expositive programs that we run Monday to Fridays. And you want to know more about us, can you visit our website www.thearmorgate.org. And again, questions, feedback, comments, the mail is simple, is just contact@thearmorgate.org. Till I find my way to your devices next Friday, is me saying bye from here and wishing you a fun-filled and enjoyable weekend.